So welcome everyone, it's good to see you. Now this topic today is based on all the previous sessions that we've had so far, from session 200 onward. We've been going through all the stages of the meditation practice step by step. And so the first kind of thing that we always do is prepare the practice. We do so by paying attention to our posture, making sure that it's upright and relaxed, paying attention to our breathing, making sure that it's comfortable and deep, particularly in the first stage. Then also, of course, a great determining factor of good meditation practice is your attitude that you bring to the practice, that you want to have an attitude of kindness and compassion. One of the most basic wishes of a living being are the wish for happiness and the wish for the end of suffering, and that's exactly precisely why we actually sit down and practice meditation. Because we would like to let go of suffering, and we would like to explore the possibility of deeper stages of happiness, seeing how deep that practice can actually take us. And so the wish for happiness is kindness, the wish for the end of suffering is compassion. So that is the guiding principle of meditation practice. That's why we sit down, that's why we actually do the work. We start with the first stage, of course. In the first stage we let go of the tension in the body, helping ourselves to relax, to become comfortable in the body. Building a good posture, of course, building a good structure. And which leads us into the second stage, where we let go of the mind drifting into the future or the past, thinking about this and that. So we want to let go of that and make the mind present. So bring our attention into the present moment. In the third stage, we let go of the inner voice, the talking to ourselves. And we do that by dropping our interest in that inner voice and what it has to say, and instead shift our interest to silence, becoming more sensitive to silence actually. And discovering it as sort of an underlying principle to all the noise in the mind. That stills the mind a great deal already, but in the fourth stage, when we bring our attention to the breath, we're actually working particularly on stillness. Stillness in the mind equals energy. The mind gains energy from stillness. It loses energy through movement. It's kind of similar to the body as well. But body could be seen as a reverse engine a little bit. The body gains energy through movement and loses energy through stillness. That's of course not always true. There's many examples of where this principle does not apply, so it's quite a complex topic, of course, but kind of you can put it like that if you want. So the body is kept alive by the movement of digestion, etc., and the mind is kept alive by stillness. But since we're constantly using the energy with our minds, we have a really hard time feeling genuine happy, feeling really good within ourselves, because we're constantly losing energy to unnecessary pondering, rumination in the head, in the mind. Constantly talking to ourselves, going through scenarios of like making ourselves really, really stressed out just by the way we talk to ourselves. So letting go of that is a big step forward. And letting go of all movement in the mind altogether, it's going to give you an amazing insight into what is possible in terms of happiness. Most people don't even know how happy they could be. What is actually possible? I see many people going to gyms and practicing yoga and training their body and working on healthy diets and whatnot, but hardly anyone tends to their mind in such a way. And you could tend to your mind in exactly the same way. It's like doing a meditation session is like going to the gym. You're actually enhancing certain qualities that are even more vital than a six-pack or a firm butt. Because the body will eventually fail us, that is for sure. It will get old and flabby and difficult to carry. It becomes a burden. Even though this is something that we don't really like to hear, but this is exactly the case. So it's important to be prepared for that time. So what do you have when your body fails you? What do you have when your relationships fail you? What do you have when your order in life and your structure fails you? Your work, your money, whatever it is that we depend on, that we lean on, what do we still have left if these things are gone? Right? Until here we are really cultivating something that is reliable through all conditions. And no matter what happens in our life, we have something that we can lean on, something that we can rely on, and it is ourselves. But that is only the case if the mind is well trained. It is not the case if the mind is not trained at all. So the more you train your mind, of course, the more you can rely on yourself. The more comfortable you can be with yourself, right? So that's the reason why we stabilize the mind. Making it actually a tool that can be used. A distracted mind cannot be put to use. It cannot know itself. It's impossible. It's buzzing around. It's very erratic. You might have found out through your trials of doing meditation practice, sitting down and trying to focus the mind, and you see how hard it is to keep it still. It's fluttering around all the time, like a bird that's trapped in a room and it wants to get out. The mind is very similar. And with that, you're losing tons of energy. Particularly if it's emotional turmoil. That costs you heaps of energy. And it's unnecessary waste. So today's topic is, again, one of the tools of our inner toolbox that we can use to enhance our meditation practice and get a bit more out of it, is restraint. Restraint is something that is not really discussed often, also in meditation classes. You don't find that to be a very popular topic, to restrain ourselves. But there is tremendous power in restraint. And in fact, I would say, even go that far as to say that the true daily practice is marked by restraint. If you want to actually take the meditation practice into your daily life, you can do so through restraint. Because then it really shows whether you're at ease or not. So when talking of restraint, I'm talking about two types of restraint. I'm talking about the restraint of input and the restraint of output. The restraint of input means that you're guarding your senses as to what you let in. Like you're guarding your mouth. What do you put into your mouth, right? You worry about that, right? Maybe you're not worried about it, but you're concerned about it. You wouldn't put anything in your mouth which is toxic for your body, right? At least if you knew it was toxic for your body, would you still put it into your mouth? Many people actually do. You go through the supermarket, you read the descriptions on the back of the packaging of what you eat. Nobody knows what the heck is INS 405, but I have no trouble eating it. I don't know what that does to me, and I don't even know what it is. Fair enough. It seems to be okay. I'm trusting those guys who sell their stuff. So we eat all kinds of things that we don't even know. And that's concerning the mouth, right? So practicing restraint at the level of the mouth means watching out for what you eat in terms of what comes in. What do you eat? What do you actually feed on? What do you consume? What goes into your digestive tract? What will it be that ends up in your system? Is it good for you? So that would be an example of restraint. To not go for the stuff that you know is giving you pimples and headache and back pain and whatnot. Even though it tastes really good. That takes restraint, right? It takes a restraint. You know it tastes really good, but you know it leads to headache, let's say. You love the, I don't know, that particular dish, instant noodle soup or something. You eat that in the evening, in the morning you wake up with bone pain and headaches. Every single time. You eat the noodles, you get the pain, but it tastes so good. Right? So restraint means to let go of the taste. Stop eating for the sake of taste. Eat for the sake of health. That's what food is for, originally. It's there to charge your batteries. It's not necessarily there to taste good. That's an added bonus. You can make really healthy food taste really good. Yes, and that's okay. So what about, that's just concerning just real food and the mouth, right? What about your eyes? What do you eat with your eyes? Nowadays it's very popular to eat a whole lot of stuff with our eyes, right? You can eat through your smartphones. You can eat a whole lot of stuff every day. What kind of messages are coming in there? They have to be digested. So it would be wise to reduce those things that make your system toxic, that make your mind, that put your mind into a state that you actually don't like. But most of us are so used to that we don't even know the alternative. We don't know how nice we could feel. We only know that when we get ourselves together. For example, let's say at our retreat, I see that frequently. We have 4-day retreats almost every week. And people who come to these retreats, I recommend them in the beginning to turn their phones off for 4 days. And those who do, almost everyone who does that. 4 days, no phone, no internet, no entertainment. They all say that they feel so much better, and it's a huge surprise for them. And they also all agree that it is because they've not turned on their phones. 4 days of not eating crap. Not eating other people's crappy, low-level stories that do not make our life in any way better. Not feeding on that. Not feeding on other people's mistakes and failures. Not feeding on what's wrong with the world. Not feeding on pain and misery that's all over and in abundance. It's a type of feeding. So you have the choice there, and that's where restraint really comes in. It is a choice that you make, a conscious choice. What am I going to put in? Am I going to let that in? In Tibetan Buddhism, they talk about restraint as a sort of, or mindfulness as sort of a gatekeeper. It checks out what comes in and what goes out. That's the role that mindfulness is traditionally playing in Buddhist systems, right? So you have stuff going out and stuff going in. And what about your ears? What do you listen to? Who do you surround yourself with? What kind of stuff comes in? It will definitely shape you. It doesn't matter how much you believe that you're independent and strong and powerful and you decide who you are. That's not actually true. The Tibetans say also that the mind is like a diamond. If you put the diamond onto a red cloth, it shines in red colors. So if you put the mind into a surrounding of golfers, people who like golf, you'll be starting to become like them. You'll be starting to pick up golf and get better at it. The longer you hang out with them, you'll develop a taste for it. Even in the beginning, you had no idea what golf was and why, and slowly you start developing a taste for it. You hang out with people who fancy death metal music, slowly, it'll creep in, and you start to see something in it. That's just because of the people that we hang out with. If you come to meditation classes often and you hang out with people who meditate, etc., it makes you more meditative. So what kind of things do you listen to? We listen to a lot every day, right? What kind of information comes into your ears? Your mind has to digest. So it makes sense to be selective there. That means you really love yourself. You see what I mean? Many people say or think that loving ourselves means taking a bubble bath with a special aromatic rose scent. And then that's very nice. That's loving myself. Loving yourself means keeping yourself from things that I actually enjoy but that are harmful for you. You would do that with your children because you love them. Right? This is the same for us. We're not really good at caring for ourselves. We let a whole lot of crap come in without any question. And sure, your mind has to deal with all that crap. And it corrupts the mind. Lots of the media that we consume these days is turning people into ideologies and not people anymore. So you talk to ideologies. You're not talking to a self-thinking, empowered, autonomous being that has their life under control and asks questions and wants to grow. You talk about indoctrinated stuff, like who are you, what are your beliefs, and then people cite a mass belief. I don't like Donald Trump. Well, I know what media you watch. I love Donald Trump. Now I know what media you watch. I know what is indoctrinating your mind. And that you become very predictable through this. Your whole system can be guessed through and through, like a robot. You push that button, this will happen. You push this button, that will happen. So predictable. There's no questions asked anymore. People think they know everything. It's a big problem. It corrupts societies, it corrupts families, it corrupts everything. It corrupts our joy that we could have with ourselves. Being at ease with ourselves. It disturbs the mind. So the question is, what do I let in? Why do I let that in? Through the mouth, through the eyes, through the ears, the nose, and through the body. Exercise as such is a good thing. How do you exercise though? Are you injuring yourself? Are you busy injuring yourself? Or are you actually treating yourself well? Also, that is difficult to find out. Many people hurt themselves a great deal, and for a lot of sports this becomes evident after 10 years of doing it. So we got to do things with care. Maybe you're young, you can do what you're doing right now, but what does it do to the little nooks and crannies in your body? How does it change you? What is used up? Ask yourself. So how you treat yourself, what you let in through the gates of the senses is extremely important. What kind of views, what kind of opinions, that's the gate of the mind. What kind of intellectual ideas, what questions do you let in? So that's one type of restraint. Obviously super important because what you consume shapes you. It turns you into who you are right now. You are right now who you are because of what you have consumed so far. You're a product of all the things you've consumed. So if you deal with problems of fear, It comes from things you've consumed. If you deal with problems of depression, anxiety, it comes from all the things that came in through the senses and shaped your mind. And your neuronal system, your brain, the way you move, the way your cells regenerate, everything. The other type of restraint is what goes out. That is equally as important. Now, knowing that we have a whole lot of stuff in there which is not optimal, what is it that I let out? If I'm getting angry at someone, should I let that out? Should I express my anger to that person? Is that truly going to help solve the situation? Or is it just more anger in the world? Is my anger truly righteous? Is there such a thing as righteous anger? We need to ask ourselves these questions. It's important to analyze what we do and what it leads to. How many times in the past, when you've really expressed anger, did it actually hit understanding in the other person and not resistance? I've never, ever felt that in my life, whenever have actually expressed anger, that it led to a solution of a conflict. What led to a solution was compassion, understanding, listening. And that always happened when the anger was cooled down. When I was on fire with anger, wow, the fire wanted to spread everywhere. And it still does when I get angry, so I'm very careful with anger. It's one moment of anger that can destroy your entire life. One moment of anger is enough. It's a very dangerous energy. Do you want to host that in your being? Is it worthwhile expressing? Well, then it would not be right to say, I abhor wars, I don't like wars, I don't like conflicts, I don't like cruelty, I don't like hate. All that comes from anger. And right now, when you're harboring it, it also works through you. You're part of that thing that you don't like when you're in a state of sanity. But when we get into a state of insanity, when anger takes over, it's almost like a demon, like being possessed by a sort of a demon, then it will work through you, it will operate through you, and it will pursue its goals. What are the goals of anger? Well, destruction, consummation, like fire. So it is really wise not to express it. So what should we do then? Should we suppress it? That is equally as unwise. Then it will consume you from the inside and lead to depression. It will destroy you and eat you up. Lots of people are suppressing anger. It is not right. Anger is a very clear feedback mechanism. It tells you that something in your life needs questioning. Something in your life needs you to look and get things together. Something needs working. It's suffering, pain, whatever suffering you experience is always feedback. It gives you feedback. It tells you here's something wrong, something needs dealing with. So we don't express it, we don't suppress it, but we understand it. And that's the approach that we use. It's not that there is just two approaches, suppression or expression. There is the other approach, which is understanding it. That means you kind of have to look at it while it's there. While you're burning, you have to look at it. So you can extinguish the flames and care for yourself. What do you do when in your house a little fire starts? You immediately jump up, right? Why? You all have reasons, right? These are very valid reasons. What do you do when in your mind a little fire starts? It's the same thing. If you don't extinguish it right there and then, it will spread. And it will take your arms, and it will take your legs, and it will make them move in ways that you would later regret. So it is super important to practice restraint. And I know how difficult it is. It's one of the most difficult things, but it is also one of the most rewarding things. Instead of expressing my anger, even though it's so hard in the storm of the anger that goes on, in that very moment to step back and look at it and actually aim to understand it and bring compassion into it and take care of myself, love myself, in that moment is very difficult but super rewarding. That will give you self-respect, a whole lot of it. Well, there's many such points where you're getting self-respect. And it comes through restraint as well. It comes through not acting on impulse. Like someone pushes your button and you just go for it. It makes us kind of feel like having no respect for ourselves. But if you actually make a choice here, no, I know this is harmful for me and for the other person, I'm not going for it, even though it's hard. That gives you self-respect, because you're doing something that is really hard, but really noble. It's virtue. You're protecting yourself and you protect those people around you. It gives you, at the end of the day, it makes you sleep like a baby. Because you know you've done well. It's easy to express such things, right? And it's even more difficult with those feelings that are pleasant but harmful, to practice restraint there. So for me, I personally see restraint of input and restraint of output as a game to see where I'm at with my practice. And I would occasionally challenge myself, if life doesn't do that anyways for me, which it does occasionally. But if it doesn't, then I would challenge myself on a daily basis. If I see an opportunity to challenge myself, I do so. For example, instead of giving that snappy comment back to my wife when she says something, I don't. Or instead of showing the other person that they have made a mistake in a conversation and pointing out that mistake, like, here you were wrong here, I don't. And that's not easy for me. For example, letting another person have their experience and their view and their path when I apparently, quote unquote, know better. I have to be really careful. Do I really know better? I have to question that. Do I actually know better? I'd like to believe that. I think most of us like to believe that they know their stuff and that we're very professional at what we do and adult about things. But if you really, really question things, it becomes apparent rather fast that we don't know that much. That we're kind of just guessing our way. We just try to make it work somehow. So it's difficult. It requires restraint for me not to speak. It requires restraint very often to listen to another person. For example, I might listen to someone telling me about their problems and I have all the answers, again, quote unquote. It's really hard to just listen and then also listen with sincerity, out of a willingness to actually understand the other person, where they're coming from. It's not easy. And it requires restraint. I have to shut up so that I listen. And the other person can express themselves, which is really beneficial for the other person. It makes for good relationships, which is a bonus in life, right? Well, there's many, many, many examples that we could give that how restraint benefits you, how you can play with it. And how does it benefit in the meditation practice? Because I call it an inner tool here. Everything we do in the practice is restraint. From the very beginning, when you're putting yourself into a good posture, you're restraining yourself. You're restraining the body. You make sure not to move the body. Instead, You kind of have to find ways to relax differently. So what does restraint do? It puts you in a position forcefully where you have to become creative. There's no way out. You're not allowed to move the body. You put that restraint on yourself. So here I am. For 15 minutes, I have to sit here and not move my body. How am I going to deal with that? Super difficult. My body is painful. I want to really move. What other ways are there for me to relax? So if your restraint is powerful, you will not move for these 15 minutes. And if you're really curious and you really want to find a way out of suffering, you will become very creative in those 15 minutes. And that creates expertise, it creates experience. Right? Bringing the mind just to the breath, only the breath, that is ultimate restraint. You let go of everything but the breath. That is restraint. Why would you do that? Because when you do it, you become more and more happy, more and more comfortable, more and more blissful. If you haven't had any experience with meditation here, talk to those who are in the room, who are coming for quite a while. They can tell you that when your mind becomes quiet and doesn't move, it feels incredibly good. There is nothing in the world that can compare to these feelings of bliss that you develop in meditative practice. Nothing. It makes our usual kind of joys look like, I don't know, a frog compared to a top model or something like this. Yes? Don't want to make it seem like the frog is ugly, yeah? I don't want to discriminate frogs. Just a side note. So all the frogs who might be offended and triggered right now. So, restraint is central to the practice. Everything you do in meditation is restraining. You bring the mind to just one thing. And it's not a negative kind of forceful, sort of grim restraining. It is not. It's very playful. I like to approach it like that. Some people like to approach it like, kind of got to be super tough and just grit your teeth and sweat and blood and whatnot. That doesn't resonate with me personally. It resonates with some people, not with me. With me it resonates to actually playfully engage these things, to play with that, challenge yourself a little bit, get out of your comfort zone, see what growth is actually there for you. And restraint does that for you. Restraint puts you immediately out of your comfort zone if it's genuine. So it immediately makes you learn something new. Yeah, I guess that's good enough to talk about restraint. Are there any questions?